Great. Well, thank you for coming to our final session of the Cook County Food Summit, 2020 Food Summit. Very excited for our final plenary today, building a good food future. Very excited for our panel today. We have an amazing selection group of women who I've had the honor of working with for many years and know how hard their work has been and all the challenges that they faced over the years to get to this place, and really excited to hear their perspective on and hope for what's next for our local food system and food justice in the area. I'd like to introduce them now. And we have Erica Allen, who's the co-founder and operations director for the Urban Growers Collective, CEO, and the president of Green Era Educational nonprofit and co-owner of Green Era Sustainability Partners. Erica founded and was the director of Growing Power Chicago for 15 years. Welcome, Erica. We also have Jakari Cole Quayle, farmer for many years in the Pembroke area, and her farm is Ayabo Farms. Welcome, Jahari. We also have Angela Mason, the Associate Vice President of Community Engagement and Senior Director of Windy City Harvest at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Angie's been leading the urban ag efforts at the Botanic Garden since 2003. Welcome, Angie. And Lena Hatchett, Associate Professor at Loyola University, Chicago Health Sciences, and co-founder and executive lead for Proviso Partners for Health. Welcome, Lena. Thank you all for coming and taking the time this afternoon. So we'll start with a question, then we'll go around. What does a good food future mean to you, and how does it relate to your work? And we can start with Johari.
All right, so, well, good food is something that I grew up on. Being a child and a grandchild of farmers, I've always been exposed to what good food was. So, and the unfortunate thing is that when, growing up and being exposed to other kinds of food, you realize especially what you miss. As I got older, I realized what I missed. And part of that was the good food was really connected to the land. And my grandparents who farmed, they provided that for me. They provided that sustenance. So it was not fast foods all the time or eating out all the time. It was food that they grew and cultivated and preserved. And that's what I grew up on. And so I missed that as I got older. So good food to me gives me a sense of place and time when my body felt good. And the further I got away from it, that's when a lot of the ills or the challenges start to creep in. And so I had to return to the soil.
That's great, thank you. And then in terms of for the future, I guess it's coming back to the past for you.
Absolutely, yes. So, what I did as a kid, I swore I was not gonna shell another pea. I was not gonna do that. I wasn't gonna wring another chicken or pluck another chicken or any of that. And in my 20s, I found myself running back to the land. So the future of farming, it gives, I think it anchors all of us, because we need to get closer to the soil again. The further we get, that's like I said, we see a lot of the illnesses, we see a lot of the just not feeling well, the malaise that happens rapidly through our communities. And we all just turning back to that soil really gives us a sense of place and health.
Thank you. Erica, what's a good food future for you?
So share, of course, similar kind of upbringing and that kind of coming back to the land as Jahari. I think that's a lot of us. It is that combination of the past and kind of reckoning the inequity from kind of, I've been thinking about this a lot lately around, especially with the election and all of the resistance that has resurged. Thinking of our ancestors in that timeline of post-proclamation emancipation and the kind of policies and infrastructures that were put in place to really continue to steal the wealth and brilliance and ingenuity of Black people and Indigenous people, and how we're still getting catching up from that, which is, I think most folks understand that at this point, I hope, that when we talk about the importance of racial equity and ownership of the food system, that is not just, diversity, it's reparational repair. And it's super important that people of color, especially Black folks and Indigenous folks in this country, are at the lead of that. And so to me, that is the future of good food, and also making sure that the systems that we're creating aren't exploiting another group of people. So to me, fixing the food system isn't really about fixing the food system. Like, that's not going to repair all these other things and the underlying structures that continue to kind of rear their heads because we haven't addressed structural racism. So it's difficult to even think about an alternative financing system without the same players being in control of those decisions. It's very difficult to capitalize projects if you're a person of color trying to do work in your community. So that's definitely needs to be rectified for this good food future to actually manifest. And that the kind of marriage between technological necessities and engineering, and of course with the work that we're embarking on with Green Era, of this closed loop, full closed loop monetizable system that can actually contribute back to the community. And at the same time, continuing to uphold, support, and value small scale intervention. So to me, it is just as important to hold and respect the small scale operators, whether it's a homesteader, backyard, porch grower, to somebody who has a multi-million-dollar, controlled under glass, hydroponic system. Like those pieces are both very important. And I think that that this movement and us as leaders have to be able to hold both of those things that seem like they're like maybe scale, like, oh, this is going to have more of an impact than this, but really understanding that this repair work is needed for all of those pieces to really create the transformation that we want to see. So.
Great, thank you. Angela, good food future for you.
Hi, thank you for having me here today as part of the panel. I think similar to Johari and Erica, I spent a lot of time growing food with my grandparents and in the garden as a young kid. And I think the difference is I kept running towards it. I never ran away. And I'm glad that I've been part of this since I could kind of walk, really. I think in terms of looking at what good food system looks like, or the future of food systems looks like, and through my lens, is we've tried to operate with 3 pillars with Windy City Harvest, and that's food, health, and jobs. And looking at access to living wage jobs in the food space and helping train and getting people those living wage jobs is important. I think connecting food to everybody's health and wellness, like we're doing through Veggie RX, I think that's really important, and I think it helps. Show how important food is to your health and wellness generally, and not just what we do, but if you have a healthcare provider standing behind you and saying you really should consider eating healthier and here's a prescription for healthy food. I think that's one way to help encourage people to change eating habits a little bit, not entirely, but a little bit. And then also access to fresh, culturally appropriate, organically grown produce. I think having those three things is going to be important to changing kind of the face of the food system.
Great, thanks, Angela. Lena, for you and your work, what is Good Food Future?
Yeah, it's honored to be on this panel with you folks. I feel like a total imposter. I had no relationship to food growing up. I think my family cooked good, healthy food and I didn't eat it. I went for the junk and the fries and the burgers. And I think I'm telling the story because it wasn't until the community in Maywood started to teach me about growing food and health that I must have been in my 30s that I started to see what food could teach and created a new relationship. And so I tell that story that it doesn't matter if you never grew up and you never grew and you whatever your story is, people can change and transform. And good food is if we nurture the land and water what we're growing, we get a healthy plant. And it's the same with the people. We always want to get a shortcut, not invest, dehumanize people, and then we think we're going to have a healthy, good person, and we don't. So good food for me in the future is seeing urban ag and growing as a model for how we treat ourselves and how we treat, how we could nurture and invest in our young people, particularly African American, Latinx, and those neighborhoods that have been disinvested and dehumanized in incredible ways. So.
Thanks, Lena. So the Good Food Future has a lot of different elements to it, much beyond just the growing, but the personal transformations and community transformations that could happen with the different investments and really recognizing the historical inequities that have led to this place that we're in now. So thank you, guys. The theme for the session, for the week, was focused on the good food purchasing policy, which Cook County has adopted, which is working to increase demand and support for more local, sustainable, fair, humane, and healthy food in the public agencies and departments like the hospital system, the juvenile temporary detention center, and Cook County jails. What challenges do you all see in ensuring that local farms and food businesses, especially farmers and food businesses of color, to benefit from such policies at the county or other institutions as well? We'll start with Erica this time.
I kind of faded out a little bit, honestly. So
what are the challenges and opportunities?
I'm like visioning in my head. Challenges and opportunities with the GFPP at the county level? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Or other institutions, but yeah.
In institutions. So I think that, this is sort of the complexity with procurement policy and then having such a gap with, I'm always going to come to this from a racial equity perspective and a gender equity perspective. Is there's such a gap between sort of who's already growing and at scale and who has the certification and all of those, has the land and has all the opportunities to start, vending to within the procurement system. And then how do we create that pathway for new growers, especially since we have such a generational gap where we don't have enough farmers who are growing edible human food. Entering into agriculture or have access to land generationally, which is where that repair work and the reparational conversation is very real because, and I think this is really like, I'm excited to hear Jahari's response because I think Pembroke is really that kind of epicenter around kind of this reclamation piece, but also, continues to struggle with not having enough capital infrastructure and investment and the resources to really catch up to white counterparts in the area. So I can't like getting healthy food into the system is absolutely can happen right away, that it can scale up. But when you add a racial inclusion, equity frame on top of that, it makes it much more challenging because there's a lot of catch up that needs to happen, and they both have to happen at the same time. And I think that reconciling those two realities is kind of where we're at. And to me, it doesn't make sense to not address them both equally, because I don't know how else you change these dynamics, right? So making sure people have access to good food, making sure folks it's affordable and tangible. Those are all things that are incredibly important, but removing and repairing the underlying issues to why that disconnection is there, why folks are not making those choices, and why folks aren't being able to monetize and build wealth around the system is why there's such health disparities. So it's like this catch-22 component that I think that it needs to be addressed in the most. I mean, we have minority women business certification, right? So we have this whole system that's set up to kind of address that inequity. And it's still difficult because you still have to have the resources to even enter into that space, to have the land, to have all of those pieces. So until those things are addressed, I think it's going to be very difficult from a racial equity frame on the grower end of things for things to be more even. On the consumer and increasing folks' health and the ability to have high quality, nutritionally dense meals in institutions, that of course also has a racial equity impact, because the majority of folks that we're talking about are people of color who are impacted disproportionately. So I think on both ends it has to be addressed. I think that we're getting really close to figuring out this puzzle and all the land, the capital, the larger entities, thinking of Aramarks and all of the entities that typically get these large institutional contracts, shifting their corporate practices to make space for smaller entities to begin building their businesses.
Great, thank you. Not an easy fix, but lots of opportunities if those two things can be held at the same time and approached at the same time, there could be an opportunity for making some transfer, leveraging the potential there. Jahari, from your perspective, how do you see kind of a values-based procurement creating opportunities for farmers, for yourself and other farmers in your community?
Well, to Erica's point that reparations needs to happen within the system, because, from African American standpoint, we never got the 40 acres and a mule. Back in the day, that was our capacity to farm, to create, to do what we had been doing in this country for hundreds of years. And then not to be able to have those basic needs, those tools to be able to produce and be in the game of producing for America, that set us back, generations. Even now, many of the farmers go into who have the desire, the complete will to want to get into the land and grow and produce. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the infrastructures built in to be able to do that. So simple things, even if you do a no-till method, having the, like Erica said, the land, first of all, the water source, to have the basic, even a planter costs money. And unless we are, going to play the same game that the large conventional farmers are involved in, which is unfortunately the welfare system, where they get the kickbacks of $300,000 plus, for their capacity building. Unless we're going to play that same game, then then we're not going to be able to compete on a larger scale. We're not going to be able to compete on the scale to provide food for 20,000 plus people for a Chicago WIC program, when our capacity can only do maybe 300 to 400. And so the Aramarks and the Cisco's are not even going to look our way, because we can't grow in that large capacity. Because and one of the reasons is because of either we don't have space. At one time, we were not even considered real farmers in the game if you didn't have over 200 acres of land. So we're anybody less than that, we're considered not really considered, kind of overlooked, not really a real player, more of a hobbyist, someone that's just playing in the fields on the weekend. And that also, that stigma has been hanging over our heads too, and I'm so grateful that a lot of that is starting to break down. And that's part of the things that we have to do. We have to look at, is it even necessary to provide large scale food systems the way we have been? I used to run the Springfield with one of my Farm Bureau brethren, loved him. And he always said, "We're feeding the world, Jahari, we're feeding the world." And I always had to come back and say, well, I'm feeding you and your family, because the corn and soybean is not going to go far. So, what the rainbow colors that we're looking for, that's where the small scale farmers do best. And providing that, that upfront nutrition that we need. My future, outlook on the whole system I would love to see that when Illinois is providing just tomatoes. If we can just grow our own tomatoes in the state of Illinois and provide it to all the schools in the form of ketchup, fresh tomatoes, or soup, tomato soup, just tomatoes, just one product, and that they provide the equity for everyone to get on board. And the support system, so the people who have the will to want to grow, they can do so.
Thank you. And Angie, you all are doing farmer training as well at Windy City Harvest. That's part of your work. How do you see, potential for institutional purchasing with kind of weighted for value and weighted around equity, creating opportunities for them as they're coming out of your programs?
Yeah, I think training and scale are two of the things that always come to mind when thinking about large scale institutional procurement. And one of the things that I think is going to be important is having some kind of cooperative, or having some kind of hub that smaller scale growers can get their certification through and be able to move their product through. If you're only growing 75 pounds of eggplant because you're growing on a quarter acre of land, then you're going to be hard pressed to move that through Cook County hospital systems. So figuring out that kind of bulk purchasing, I think, is going to be important. Working together so that the smaller scale farmers have somebody to move their product through. That's, I think, one of the only ways that we're going to reach some of the goals. And we do a little bit of that with our incubator farmers and helping move their product through VeggieRx, but that's a very small scale there too. So figuring out how to bring in quantities of produce that are going to be attractive to some of the buyers. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges, right? in this idea of serving large institutions. So I think giving people the training and the background and the food safety kind of language, and because it's a whole different language when you start looking at some of the food safety, the gap training, and all of that. It's a different language. So training people in those systems and helping people understand those systems will just help move it forward that much quicker, I think. And that's kind of how we're trying to approach it, is helping people with gap certification, helping people kind of bring their product together to market and sell. I think that we're going to have to do that on a larger scale.
Right, thanks. So building off of, over time, building off of what the progress that's already been made, but really looking, maybe thinking about some creative options and some new opportunities that can come from collaboration and cross partnerships as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we're all going to have to work collaboratively from all reaches of like peri-urban, suburban, rural, farming. All of it's going to have to come together in order for us to meet the demands, because the demands are there. It's just figuring out how to approach it in a way that is equitable.
Thank you. Lena, you all, the Proviso Partners for Health and your other collaborators and community partners in the western suburbs are looking at, it seems like building your own kind of system, food system, with the different parts and pieces together that could potentially build to supporting things like the good food purchasing policy. What opportunities do you see there?
Well, the idea of the good food purchasing policy is something back in 2011, we dreamed about having an opportunity to even be heard by the hospitals and the schools. And I think the policy helps to create a language in which we can partner around having the values. You know, the question of what's in it for me? What's in it for a Black farmer? What's in it for a white hospital? What's in it for the community residents? And at least it's a language that we can talk about. It's a goal that we can share. I think the drawback and the concern that I hear with our panelists is there's no magic bullet. One policy with commissioners approving it is an important, powerful first step, but let's not get it wrong, right? That does not, one policy with the approval does not transform historic structural racism built into every single one of our systems, our school, our food system, our businesses, and our neighborhoods. And so we want to support it. I think it can help us move, but we also need transformation in many, many other ways. And we keep making the same mistake. Something new comes along and we get all excited and we feel like that's going to address our culture of racism. For us at PP4H, we're looking for those pathways to transform. And just like Jahari said, we're starting small. We started with 2 people, and with the help of Windy City Harvest, we started with 20 youth, and we learned our way forward dollar by dollar, crook by crook, to change the local food system. And PP4H is a bridge to the pieces that are missing within the system. And we rely heavily on collaboration, and I've learned a lot from everyone in this call and on this conference. We didn't know how to grow, but we learned it by partnering. We didn't know how to sell or market, but we learned it through partners on this call. And the good food purchasing policy helps us, but we have to work on this now and also vision for what we want for the future. And for PP4H, we're capitalizing on food entrepreneurs, and they live in the neighborhood. And when I'm a person of living with inequity because of my race, because of my gender, because of my income, I have solutions and I have idea and I want to lead and I want the opportunity to spread that voice. And PPH does that. We're not going outside looking for anybody special. We take people as they come. I heard it on a TV show, and so I don't know where the quote came from, but you all might have heard it before. And it says, if we're not buying the product, we are the product. And maybe people have heard that before. I heard it on a movie. And the disinvestment and the disenfranchisement, all of that benefits people. So that's why they're invested in doing it. Creating food inequities, not having business models that work for a community like Maywood, right? So that's benefiting somebody's pocket and somebody's power. And so we have to look at what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if we're not buying the product, owning it, designing it, then we're being sold. That's going to be a big part to transformation that we can create because of COVID and because of the racial justice. I think Erica said the resistance that's happening right now. This is an incredible opportunity. While we're all suffering, it's breaking down the systems that have never worked for us. Right? The food system doesn't work. The education system doesn't work. Can we put those two together and create a pathway? Can we have an apprenticeship model for farms that can help kids in school as well as grow food locally? Stop there.
Thanks, Angela. Lena. Erica, building off of what Lena was just saying around the challenges of COVID, but some of the opportunities and possibly transformations that could be coming out of this moment that could be bringing hope for for moving towards a good food future.
I've been really, this arc of, let's say, 20 years of doing this work consistently in Chicago and being, part of training and supporting, coaching entities, developing as well, including Green Youth Farm from way back in the day. I'm really excited. Like, I feel really optimistic. You can't do this work without having an extreme amount of optimism and belief in our ability to overcome these like almost impossible, miracle, the things that the community, I'm here at the South Chicago Farm, which is publicly owned land. So it's the commons, it's, all of our land. And the argument has always been that food security and the ability to feed the citizens in any civilization, you have to have a food system that functions. You have to have people who can grow the food and that are doing the best to meet the nutrition and cultural needs of the community. And our food system does not do that. It's very exploitive. And it really kind of links into creating disease because, of course, if you have disease, then you're able to prescribe pharmaceuticals and you're able to make lots of money. And if you own both of those systems, you're able to really control a whole population. So I'll just drop that little piece, which I think everyone knows, but it's always good to speak on it because then it's illuminated a little bit. So when you have a 7-acre publicly owned space that is organically developing by and with and for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and white allies, and folks who care about all of those things. And we have folks with resources who also see the importance, who are part of that, and that everybody has a seat at the table. And we say this a lot, and it's like a cliche at this point, but it's important. Like, everybody from, needs to be part of the conversation and bringing the different pieces that are needed to really magnify the impacts. So an incubator farmer figuring out, or I'm thinking of, there's several trios or duos here who are trying to figure out cooperative business models. How do you cooperatively farm? How do you monetize that in a way that's not exploitive and is meeting whatever your financial goals are? that's incredibly restorative and important and is scalable, but the scale should not be, folks should not be pushed to scale where they're jeopardizing their integrity, their values, and their relationship to the land. And so I think that's the tension of, like getting into larger operations, which is where, Angie mentioned this a little bit, the opportunity as folks build community and are able to cooperate because there isn't such limited resources, but folks are stabilized, they have land, they're building, they have their own customer base. For a small grower of wholesale, this makes no sense. It's ridiculous. You don't make any money. Doing direct sales, selling, being part of a larger procurement component where you're contributing what you can, it's part of your pro forma, really understanding the diversification in this work is where you make money, where you're also a trainer, where you're also doing ecotourism. And most folks who are doing this are like that. They're entrepreneurial, they're multi-talented. I mean, farmers are brilliant, like there's no, you farmers, you just stay on the land. Farmers have figured out everything, so we're scientists, we observe nature, business, like all of it. So the idea that there's one size fits all is needs to be abolished. And then the understanding that every one of these models is still emergent. Like this is reclamation emergent work. Like this is still being figured out. And there's things that I've learned so much from the like incubator farmers, the beginning farmers, as they're figuring out their businesses, and that everyone's sort of doing their own thing, but has opportunities to coalesce and cooperate. And, it's amazing, just with having a little stability, a little consistency, having basic resources. We're not talking about like basic water, land, a clean baseline, like there's no contamination that's gonna suddenly you're growing stuff and find out it's all contaminated, like basic. We know how to do all that. And enough startup resources that folks can really get started. That's not hard. Now taking that and creating pathways where there's larger tracts of land, where you're starting to mechanize in bigger ways, you're starting to build more infrastructure. That's the piece that there needs to be a really strong bridge past these incubator type programs. Now, we decided to not, because of the excellent programs that are already in place that Windy City operates and several other entities, we decided to focus on what do you do when you're done with your training? Like you're ready to start growing. You put your sweat equity in, you need your land, you want to start whatever your business is. And that was a big gap. And so this farm in South Chicago is a model. It's still in the model phase, even though we've done all of these other models that have contributed a great deal to the food shed and all kinds of other things, to have space that folks can be working in perpetuity, which is, 20 years ago, people would get all ashen and scared when I would say that around land use, but it's important for agriculture because it is growing food and building culture for it to be permanent. You can't just wipe it out when you decide something else is more valuable to put that into place, because then it displaces everybody. And so agriculture and the commitment in Chicago and peri-urban and our state and our bioshed is so key because we have this incredibly important resource of water. So that is our water and food. It's not going to be oil. Oil is so done. So
Done.
oil is just so
past.
problematic. We don't need oil anymore. And water. Water is what the oil people want. The water. You can't drink no oil. To put it in, country folk speak, you can't. So, so I'm kind of being tangential, but I think it is important that it is tangential because that's the only way we come up with new solutions, and also recognize that the ability to scale is there. Like we've already experienced that. This is a big part of what my dad proved, right?
Absolutely.
But without capital, how do you do that without capital? You can't. Right. And it's very difficult to access capital if you don't have collateral, land, ancestral land, some kind of money, If you don't have that, you can't. You're stuck. And I think that piece, because most of us doing the smaller work having even gotten to the point where we even think about capital unless we're part of a bigger institution or there's other things. You don't even get that far because you're just struggling to survive. And I think that those narratives and that understanding is always left out of these conversations. And I think it's incredibly important because it reflects the challenges that the community is facing. It's the same issue. So that is key. And I can't, if that's my last word, that is, I don't know how else to move forward without that truth being seriously considered and that there's a lot of energy put forth to rectify it.
Ashe.
Thank you. Jahari, for you, the building off.
Chime in? I can chime in?
Please do. And
Okay. Well, very excited. Just the thought of in my earlier years getting started in Pembroke, Erica's father was such a big instrumental influence and mentor back then. And I want to just say, I'm working with these ladies on the panel. We're growing together. We've grown together. We've been in this, 20 plus years for the state of Illinois. And it's so beautiful to see you all still in the game, still, fighting warriors, boots on the ground, still trying to make it happen. This is phenomenal. But the unfortunate things, it still means that there's a lot of work to do. I see your faces. We're not able to retire yet. That's the unfortunate thing. But anyway, there's been so many changes over the last 20 years. Our very first Chicago Food Summit that I remember attending was 2001. As a matter of fact, I still have the booklet for it. Yes, I think all your names are in there. So it's been a long time. But the beautiful thing is, back then we were really putting a lot of these things on the table. What we're going to do, this food system sucks. There's no food in the hood. How are we going to, deal with our homeless populations, our food insecure folks? There's a lot of work that has been done over these last 20 years that I can just literally see the timeline and the progress that's happened. And then at the same time, we still got so much work to do. So capacity building is one of the things that we really got to focus on. A lot of the things that Erica was saying, I get so many, I get so many people saying, well, I want to farm. And they'll get land and then they get discouraged within the first few years because they didn't realize that tractor was $20,000 or the implement alone was $8,000 just to put on the tractor. And then their capacity, they don't have anywhere to put the food in terms of cooling it before they take it to the market. They don't have the proper vehicle to transport the food to the market. So all of these things that start coming into play and start questioning those folks who really, really want to do it. The other thing is that they start realizing is, wait a minute, I've literally raised food grown, I've harvested, I've, bled, my knuckles are bleeding for the last 6 months. And this is all I'm getting in terms of pay. I can't support myself like that. How am I going to feed my family? So farmers are, when people make a decision to want to go into the business of farming, it is a business. It's not just a feel-good moment. For many people, they want to make careers out of it. Or, and I can understand if they want to try it out and they're going through the training programs. But like you said, Erica, after that, then what? I've always asked, we have beginner farmer trainings, but after that, then what? How are we going to support those farmers who really want to do the business of farming, and support them so that they can actually feed their families? How are they going to, be able and not have to work off farm, and struggle and strive? And I'm not saying that I still work off farm. I still don't see the value of the work putting in, not in terms of dollars. The value, I always tell people, you have to have a greater love for doing this that has to supersede the income that's going to come in. because that's the only thing that keeps you in the game, because the income is not reflective of the value, the input and the value that's been put in. A lot of our, especially in the city, I know people step, there's so many nonprofits, or they say you have to start a nonprofit in order to see any value, any money and dollars coming in, and it shouldn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to be that way to support people who are really want to have who have the desire to want to feed their neighbors and feed the world. So our large conventional farmers say. So we really got to start looking at that system of how, I always rate about Cuba. When the embargo hit Cuba, they really had to turn inward, and their farmers became like senators, because they realized, oh my gosh, we need food, and we need to turn. All of a sudden, the farmers became very, very important. So they broke the piggy banks, and they gave the farmers everything they needed for capacity building to make sure that they were able to get those seeds in the ground out in wonderful quality organic produce, by the end of the harvest, and transport it to everyone that, within the island of Cuba. So, we saw something similar happen during this COVID situation. I have never in 20 years seen the federal government provide a grant opportunity directly to the farmers in the capacity that they have, or a lot of other organizations who've reached out to farmers specifically, individual farmers. Usually you have to be involved in an organization or something of that nature. But the food insecurity became a real thing, especially during this COVID pandemic. And people who had those wills to want to farm, they became very, very invaluable. So we need to hold on to that trend. Don't let it go. Everybody start backing up all these farmers and all of our farm organizations, and what Lena's been doing, and my own personal farm. We have been partnering with Lena's organization since the beginning of the year, and it's been a wonderful transition. Just the support of getting us the capacity, getting us to capacity level to be able to provide for larger institutions like hospitals. And so we need to continue that support with everyone. One more thing, when we say that, I agree with you, Angela. I know I'm with an organization where food safety is primary. As soon as you start selling one dime worth of food, you've become a commercial farmer. You're going into the business of actually someone else's health is really at stake, and the liability that's put on you. And so all farmers, if you're in listening ear, you must go through your training, become a food health advocate, learn your safety, your food safety, please do so. And then you're at the capacity, working with partners, build your capacity so that you can become a proper partner. You can't collaborate if you're not up to stuff. So all of us have to be individually strong in order for us to have a proper collective. I'm done.
Thank you so much. Angela, so building off of some of the things that Erica and Johari and Lena were bringing up, so anything that's come out of your experience with COVID and with Windy City Harvest, and opportunities that, or new potential alliances, recognition of the value of the work that's come out of it, but also any reflections on the path, as Johari mentioned, that it's been 20 years plus for some of us in the space, and any transformations you've seen that lead to optimism as well.
Yeah. It has been almost 20 years. It
has been.
And it doesn't, some days it feels like 5 years, some days it feels like 50.
Yeah.
Just building off of what Johari said, I mean, the new Food Safety Modernization Act, like that, I think really made us take a step back and look at how we needed to support the food system, the local food system through additional trainings and bringing people in and trying to figure out a system so that small producers do have a market. And I think that everything that we've all worked on for the last 20 years is building those pathways and trying to inform policies to support that continuum for people that are starting out maybe with a little allotment garden and really liking the opportunity to grow and produce their own foods and wanting to do something more. And so then they go into a training program, whether it's with Erica or at Pembroke or wherever, you know, just planting that first little seed to get them interested and engaged in the space, and then helping people understand that farming isn't sexy. I mean, it is hard work, and you aren't going to become monetarily, you're not going to become rich. You're not going to become rich by farming. Not money rich, maybe spiritually, maybe community, maybe other ways, and that's important too. And so helping people realize that you have to see that it's not, you're not going to be totally self-sufficient just farming. And being realistic about that up front. I think that, you know, telling people that you can really make it on a quarter of an acre is a disservice. You know, it's really just supporting what you're doing and supporting yourself, and it's additive. It's not the end game. But hoping that things are shifting. I think, you know, COVID is a perfect example. We've had more demand for produce since COVID than I can ever really remember. And we shifted early in the season because we used to do about 40% restaurant sales and 60% to community and Veggie RX. And this year we probably have 10% restaurant sales. And that shift was important for a number of reasons. One, it was supporting our incubator farmers because they were going in expecting to sell to restaurants. So helping them kind of pivot towards more emergency foods and Veggie RX type programs. And I'm starting to babble, but it really was important to see how we could support and how we could transition to emergency food and Veggie RX programs this year and help people see the importance of food. And I'm hopeful that that we all continue to work together to make the food system more equitable. And I think it started this March. We were all coming together in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Angela. I know it has been a challenging year in a lot of ways, but lots of great opportunities and projects and partnerships have definitely come out of it. People and groups and organizations really stepped up in many ways to be as responsive as possible, but recognizing that that's going to be going on for a while, that that ongoing need and the crisis is not abating immediately, and keeping our energy high and our spirits well to make it through the next few months is going to be a lot of the work. But thank you. We're getting close to time, so I have a couple more questions, and one, I'll throw this one open and let whoever wants to grab it, grab it. Examples of, are there existing farms, examples of small farmers coming together to start scaling up that you all are familiar with in the area or in other places to be able to make sell to in bigger quantities by collaborating?
Yeah, Erica, you're doing that, right, with your organization. I know we are in Pembroke. We have Pembroke Farming Family. We've been around since 2000 ourselves, and the farmers are pooling all their resources in and supporting one another to be able to do collective growing. We actually have done that for nearly a decade. In 2010, we wrote a business plan to collectively grow together. And over those 10 years, what we had realized was that capacity build, the capacity needs of all our individual farmers to do that. So 2010, we started developing training programs. It was GAP certification training at the time. Everyone being GAP certified, we realized training was key. And then providing other technical assistance information of how to actually grow as an entrepreneur to make money in the business of farming. That happened for several years. And then we worked with NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Services, for helping us to build in capacities like hoop houses and things like that over the years. And so slowly but surely, we've moved up to the point where now we can, we're nearing that, where collective growing is not something that's not achievable. It's actually achievable for most of us. We're able to get a transportation vehicle. But this took a decade to get here, and we're still just at the precipice of now all of our individual farms are building cooling systems to store. The ability to farm and grow food that wasn't an issue. Grow all day, have food. Then we also faced the issue of, well, we put all these seeds in the ground. We don't have anyone to help get it out of the ground. So that's been a huge issue, even this summer. And we need to, Angela, I'm sorry, we're going to have to figure out a way for people to make money farming. We're going to have to do that.
I agree.
Because we're losing our young people. They're like, there's no money in that. Why should I do it? Why should I even care? I can't make them. I mean, just let somebody, them others do it. And we don't know who those others are. We don't know who the somebodies are, right? But we had money to pay, and this is kind of sad. It was $10 an hour. It was minimum wage. We had money to pay young folks to help us this summer. And do you know we could not get any but a few to work the lands? And we had some who were like, okay, we'll join this program, through WIA, Workforce Investment. And as soon as they got to, you mean we really have to farm? Like, what? There's a huge disconnect here. And they were making like nearly $300 a week, and it still was not enough for them to get out in the dirt and soil. So we need to, we definitely need to work on that, because we won't have anybody to get the food out of the ground. Erica, you were trying to
I think that is one of the most fundamental pieces that is really on the federal level, is that the food system is heavily subsidized on the commodity end, but not at all on the edible end, which is where all the care and the craft and all the nutritional density and preparing the soil, that's where the food as medicine piece really kicks in.
Absolutely.
And we don't pay doctors $10 an hour. You know,
Mhm.
like we don't pay pharmacists $10 an hour. So why are we not paying farmers on a quarter of an acre a living wage to grow our
A
food
living
as
wage.
medicine for us? And it's not an issue of you can't make money. It's
Right.
if you try to do it in the way that farming, that people are taught what a farm is, then of course not. It's impossible. You have to have thousands of acres and you got to exploit the environment and people and all a bunch of stuff to make money. Honestly.
Right.
I mean, to really, without it being, again, subsidized, or you're just really, I mean, there's some awesome family farm operations and folks do really well.
Yeah.
I grew up on a family farm. We didn't have off-farm labor. So I know what that's like. I grew up doing it and it's not fun. And you know, but that's the only way you can make money, you know, is to not either you're exploiting somebody, enslaving somebody, using chemicals and equipment. I mean, and all of those things are kind of create problems in their wake that then someone else has to clean up. So getting the food system right, figuring out how to pay people living wages, valuing the way, you know, Cuba was referenced.
Absolutely.
You know, like I can say within my work, I mean, that has always been the issue. And it really, the gap between an entry level person and directors should not be huge in agriculture. You know, and so we've operated programs like other kinds of institutions when we're farmers. I mean, we're essentially all farmers. And so I think it's totally doable to fix it, but it does require federal, state, and local policies to shift the dynamic from the young people. Not every young person's going to be a farmer, but everyone should be introduced to work. You know, how to work, how to, you know, like you don't just sweat in a gym, like you can actually work and contribute to community and to the environment, and that those things have to be reconnected. And I do believe we're about to enter into a new era where that people get it. You know, we got our tech, we got our environment, and that those two pieces don't have to be disconnected. They can be very much connected, and that if we value food that we eat, that we diminish our dependency on grain-fed, ridiculous meat. I mean, we don't need to be eating all this meat. No one needs to eat that much meat. Like all of the
every day.
Yeah, like like traditionally, like you know, slaughter time. You slaughter. You do all the. You know, we never ate that much meat. So the idea of like being all these things being pushed on folks, it's not even part of our traditional diets. So all of those, it's just so much. And I know everyone's like, it's been a very intense 3 days, excellent summit. It's just so good to have these conversations happening with so many diverse players. But these are the problems to solve, which I'm excited about. I mean, it's exciting when everybody sees the issues and is agreement about what the problems are, then we can actually use our collective genius to solve them. We don't have, there's enough money. This whole fallacy of there being limited resources is a lie. It's just not true. It's shifting how we use our resources in smart ways, investing long-term in infrastructure, and doing it in a way that folks understand what that is. It's not just some big magic number and, you know, we put all our money in certain kinds of infrastructure, but not in these fundamental pieces that we need to live, you know, to literally live. So, but we can do it.
Thank you. That's a great way to start wrapping up. Lena, do you have a couple more words that you'd like to add?
I got a million, but to really echo Jahari, Erica, and Angela, what brings me optimism and literally joy is the systems that never served us are broken. Our economy is in the toilet. This is a time to collaborate and rebuild the system in the way that we want it. And we've never had this much power and this much opportunity. So I don't want people to lose hope. We have the ideas, and as Erica said, the resources are there, but we've just chose to exploit people rather than investing them. And this is the time, and at Provisor Partners, we're doing what we can to be nimble and encourage people to share their vision, and let's see how we can create it and put it into practice with all of us, with all of our partners, looking at the solidarity around the economics. You know, you're not making money from farming. We also don't need as much money as we think we do because of the value of dollars. People are running after money because they are living in fear of poverty. But if we actually collaborated more on the community level and shopped locally, bought locally, and invested in each other, you don't need a high-powered salary to do that. There's more security in the neighborhood. And, you know, we think about those things and we're testing them out and we've made small steps. We're just a very small demonstration model of what's possible, you know, not like the folks on the call, but we're generating hope. And what we learned from the local food system, then we started to apply that to other social entrepreneurship opportunities. And if anything, we're investing in hope in the community so that the next generation doesn't give up before they start. And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you all so much for going over a lot of territory and fertile ground in the last hour. So appreciative of you all sharing your personal stories and visions and narratives and the spirit of collaboration for, you know, dealing with these really large issues that, you know, all our communities are having to manage and deal with now and before. So thank you again for all of your leadership and opportunity and participation in the session. It's so thankful for it. Knowing you all are very busy, even though the farming season isn't quite finished, to take the time
No,
out.
it's
It's been very
not.
generous of you all. But thank you. We're going to transition now for a greeting, kind of ending greeting from Dr. Kiran Joshi, Senior Medical Officer and co-lead of the Cook County Department of Public Health, as we wrap up this, you know, successful 3 days for the Cook County Food Summit. So thank you all, and Dr. Joshi.
Thanks so much, Roger. You know, I just listening to some of those comments, I was tempted to just cede my time because the discussion was so good and rich. I really enjoyed that and appreciated all the comments. You know, listening to Erica, I thought to myself about how it's correct, it's true. You know, like I think younger people in particular really need to know how to work and sweat outside of a gym. I mean, my wife and I, you know, often joke around that, like, if we want to see some comedy, all we need to do is tell our kids to do some chores, and it's just complete slapstick right from the first moment, because quite frankly, they have no idea what they're doing. So that said, I really want to thank everyone for joining us for, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but our 5th annual Food Summit. I'm so proud that we prioritized the summit despite the fact that we're in the midst of a pandemic and a response to a public health emergency. More than 800 people registered for this year's summit, which I think just underscores the importance of the Good Food Purchasing Initiative and the hunger for information and work and activity and action fundamentally around food and all the related issues. As President Preckwinkle highlighted during her opening remarks, the county is committed to good government practices that build transparency, racial equity, and community economic development. Public food procurement is just one tool that Cook County government can leverage to invest in these goals, while also positively impacting the health of all of our communities. So it's our hope that this year's summit has left you feeling inspired by all the amazing efforts led by our community partners to advance GFPP values. We hope that the past few days have also empowered you to continue to work towards building a more racially and socially equitable food system in Cook County. Our collective demand for local, sustainable, fair, humane, and healthy food will have a broader ripple effect throughout the region. So on behalf of the Cook County Department of Public Health, I want to thank the Chicago Food Policy Action Council for their wonderful partnership in this year's Food Summit. Thank you again to President Preckwinkle, Cook County Commissioners, and Cook County Health for their leadership and ongoing commitment to our work. I also want to thank this year's amazing speakers, including our keynote, Paula Daniels, the virtual field trip hosts, including Cedillo's Fresh Produce, Proviso Giving Garden, Knockout Farm, and of course, Blackout Center. Chef M for her cooking demo, hundreds of summit participants, and of course, all of our staff who did, I think, some phenomenal work this past week. With that, I'm going to conclude my comments and turn it back over to you, Roger. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And we do have a final closing from President Preckwinkle, who recorded these remarks as well.
Well, here we are at the end of this year's Food Summit. I hope you all enjoyed the past few days. I also hope you feel energized about what we can do together to advance good food policies in the region. Institutional food environments and procurement processes are major systems built on years of precedent and policy reinforcement. But we must keep in mind that institutions are ultimately built by people, and people have the agency to change them when those institutions no longer serve our goals. We need creative leaders driven by a passion for good food and thriving communities. We need innovators. We need strategic thinkers. We need leaders committed to cultivating a food system that provides solutions to the major economic, environmental, and health inequities we face. It was Mexican-American activist Dolores Huerta who once said, "Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person a potential activist. Every minute a chance to change the world." Let's work together to bring about this change. Thank you.
Great. Well, again, thank you all so much for participating and your engagement throughout the week. There was posted a final feedback form for this last session. If you have time and energy to do that, that'd be really helpful as we're planning the next events. But want to thank you all and have a wonderful weekend and enjoy the fall weather that we have, and go out and support some local farmers this weekend. Oh, there's also the produce and protest box that you can find in the Sketch, and email supporting that as well, which is a collaborative box made of different Black and brown farmers from around the area. So take a look for that. And again, thank you all so much and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right.
The table about to turn. The table about to turn. The table about to turn. Yeah. I've been flipping through my timeline, trying to get my mind right. My city cried out. I got to cool down, but I'm under pressure. Looking with my Crisco. Look at what my fist go. A renegade when I'm in a rage. I got to cool down, but I'm under pressure. I keep my hands dirty, my mind clean. Got a new agenda with a new dream. I'm kicking out the old regime. Liberation, elevation, education. America, you a lie, but the whole world about to testify. I said the whole world about to testify. And the table's about to turn. Ain't gonna stop until it turn. No, I stop it to turn. We can't wait for it to turn. Yeah, the table got to turn. It's a boomerang booming back. Yeah, you laid an egg, now it's about to hatch. Yeah, you gaslighting, about to meet your match. You fuck up the kitchen, then you should do the dishes. Burning down plantations. Ain't no parking, I don't need no validation. I like sage when I'm in a rage. I don't need permission, I got my intuition.